il leggero ritardo, abbiamo sistemato alcune questioni tecniche. Allora, volevo darvi il benvenuto a nome di tutto lo staff di Mia Photo Fair per questo secondo appuntamento che ci permette di indagare una parte legata ad una delle sezioni di cui abbiamo ampiamente parlato a mezzo stampa. Ringrazio i presenti naturalmente e soprattutto ringrazio i relatori, alcuni anche internazionali che ci hanno raggiunto e che sono qui oggi per raccontarci nel dettaglio il tema reportage. Quindi buona continuazione, grazie a tutti della partecipazione e a più tardi.
Sentite? Perfetto. Allora parlerò in inglese visto che abbiamo soprattutto Henry che arriva da New York e quindi spero che sarà comprensibile per tutti. Good morning everyone and especially good morning to Henry, Andrea and Anne who gave their availability to be here today with us and to present their amazing work here at Mia Photo Fair. I wanted to open this panel dedicated to the Anthropocene with an image of a very famous painting by Caspar Friedrich, which I find to be a relevant source as a starting point to the theme of the Anthropocene. You can see a man from behind that dominates a scene, but is it really a dominator or is it just an observer? The immensity of nature overwhelms the smallness of the human being. What power does men and women really have in front of the power of nature? What relationship does human beings have with nature? What are the responsibilities that we have towards all the changes that impact the earth, the environment, the planet, the biosphere? Today, these questions take us back to the debated era of the Anthropocene, word that derives from the two Greek terms, anthropos, human being, and kainos, new, recent. But its definition and historical origin are still very controversial. Scientists, geologists, even international organizations are still evaluating when to chronologically place the beginning of the Anthropocene, whether from Industrial Revolution or even from 1945 when the first atomic bomb has been launched, and whether to use this term to define the new geological epoch following the Holocene. The objective of the panel today is to direct the conversation on the theme of the Anthropocene and the controversial relationship between man and nature, towards an artistic point of view, and more precisely, the point of view of the photographic research of the three invited artists. I will start with Anne de Carbuccia. She's a French environmental artist and filmmaker. She travels the world's most remote locations, beginning with an expedition to Antarctica, documenting the evolution of the planet and the human impact on the environment in this era of the Anthropocene. Anne was born in Corsica, a mountain in the sea. She has always been drawn to the ocean, around which she focuses much of her work. Anne's primary project has been her series Time Shrines, temporary installations created in symbolic environments that she photographs to create a permanent record. For Mia, at the Brun Fine Art booth, She's presenting 12 photos of her series Blue Thread from 2020, an investigation about the irreversible melting of the Presena glacier and the man's attempt to slow down the process. In July 2020, Anne spent several days on the glacier filming for her future documentary Earth Protectors. Anne, in fact, is also a filmmaker. Her debut short film, One Ocean, was presented at the 75th Venice International Film Festival, and in 2023, her first feature-length documentary, Earth Protectors, has been released on the adaptation and the dangers of the Anthropocene. She has established also One Planet, One Future Foundation in the US and in Italy, and its mission is to raise awarenesses on climate breakdown and the dangers of the Anthropocene. The focus of Anne's work is to move past the human-centered era of today. Starting precisely from this focus of your research, Anne, and considering that we live in an era where there have never been so many human beings on Earth, how do you imagine a world that surpasses the centrality of man and that, I imagine, you conceive more centered on the environment and on preserving our biosphere? But before I give you the floor, Anne, I would like to quote the words by Nicolas Bourriaud from his exhibition catalog, Planet B, that he organized a couple of years ago in Venice. Sorry, 1 second. Is it possible to? No, there we are. We live in an era, in the era of saturated spaces, of the immersion of human beings in an environment in which they are ubiquitous, in an atmosphere where every molecule is permeated with their activity. Climate change undermines spatial references by blurring the geographical relations and contrasts that structure our experience. When it snows in Rome in summer or when Greenland's glacier melts in the sun, our imagination becomes disoriented. Art expresses the emergence of this chaotic density while bearing witness to the gradual collapse of distance on the surface of the planet. Bourriaud's opinion about saturated spaces is not only true, but very much preponderant. We want to be everywhere, but at the same time, we are disoriented when we see how nature is acting against our possibilities and over our imagination. Now I will stop and I will leave the floor to Anne in order to let her present her work.
Well, actually, until I figure out how this works, I just wanted to comment on this image, this painting. I think it's really relevant about where we are today, and I love the fact that you mentioned, is he a dominator? Is this about man dominating the planet, which is probably something that we've been trying to do since the night of time. It's also probably because we're so afraid of it. And I've been exposed to so much in nature in so many incredibly strong places. And it's sometimes really scary. And I kind of got that sense of why we've always tried to dominate the planet. Or is he an observer? And that's where I think the Anthropocene is so interesting and why this is what it's all about today, is because that's how I feel. I feel I'm obviously, as an artist and I'm documenting, but it's also about observation. Our responsibility as artists to observe this moment, this era we're in, because it's so nuts, right? I mean, it's so transitional. It's so important, and there's so many incredible choices we have to make. So that, I think, is like just such an excellent choice of as far as the subject matter is concerned. Now, what do I do? So I'm going to try and tell you in 10 minutes. It's okay. I'm going to tell you about, in 10 minutes, about 10 years of my life. So whenever it's time for me to stop, just let me know. So I chose to show you images about, kind of what represented a little bit the work I did over the last 10 years, which was actually something that I kind of finished and ended with this feature documentary that just came out called Earth Protectors. No, just the pictures, yeah. Well, I'll keep on talking or else it's going to get really boring. Lo metti in grande, vero? E poi per spostarlo cosa devo fare? Questa, ok. Ok, prima. Okay, I think, right? Qual è la prima? Yeah. So quickly, 10 years of my life in 10 minutes, 10 years of my art in 10 minutes. This is how I started. I think obviously I was trying to channel my own anxieties when I started this project. Now everybody's put me in the drawer of the environmental artist. I consider myself an artist, but that's the drawer I'm in because obviously I'm trying to give a voice to our planet. And 10 years ago, I think, or even actually a little bit more, but, I started having this anxiety because obviously I'm Corsican, as you know now, and I have, a much stronger tie and sense of what nature is about, and I started realizing how fast it was changing, and then in the same time, I'm a mom, and then there was really this really kind of important sense of what our legacy was going to be, what we were going to transmit, what the experience of our planet and their life was going to be for my children compared to mine, all these big things that you start thinking about when you become a mother or a parent. And then all that kind of anxiety of the changes and the fact that they were not going to experience a planet like mine, like what I had experienced, the same beaches, the same forests. We never thought in our generation about whether we're going to still have our favorite beach when we'd be older or not. So all that kind of it's created this crazy melting pot in my head. And I started this series that I went on doing for 10 years of my life called The Time Shrines. And I would use these really strong symbols that are obviously, as you can tell, very influenced by Memento Mori. The hourglass and the vanity. So it's not a skull. It's not a symbol of death. A lot of people, because of contemporary art, mix it up. This is a symbol about, choice. It's about, yes, of course, we're all mortal, but we have a choice, all of us, whoever you are. You have a choice of how you're going to live your life on a daily basis. And that choice only belongs to you. You can live a superficial and vain life, thus the term vanity, or, a very positive and constructive life. And the choice right now, because of what's going on, is very important on an individual level and collective level. So I went around the world and documented our planet. So I chose to show you some of the work I did on glaciers. So this is the Morteratsch Glacier that I photographed in 2013. And I did two images. And it was an extraordinary experience because back then, the glacier was just so beautiful, this blue portal, and it had so much going on, and it was still alive and so present, and all that ancient ice was still so alive. And also it's an incredible memory of who we are and, where we come from. And this is basically to give you an idea of what it looked like. This is me with the glacier. And I'm pointing to where I actually created this installation that I just showed you. And so that was just a very beautiful experience. And that's what I went on doing for 10 years. This was 2014. And from then on, for 10 years, I documented our planet all over the world, creating these installations. About things that were still there. Obviously, I was documenting what we have, what we're about to lose, and what we've already lost. And, that's not what I'm going to show you today, but there was still a lot going on back then. And what happened is that I went back to that. So I went on, my journey of this documentation and in talking about the Anthropocene and showing, all these things we had and the choices we need to make. And in 2019, I went back to that same glacier. And this is what happened. So that's me again. And it's not even me at that same location. It's me about 100 meters back from the location that you saw on this picture. So that's what had happened to the glacier. And that was like a really big shock, because suddenly I was kind of like, okay, well, this has actually happened. Before I was creating these installations telling you, this is what could happen. This is what, but suddenly my art started being something that didn't exist anymore. It was just a memory. It was about, it has happened and this is what it looks like, and I can't even create an installation there anymore. And so that was a big turning point artistically. And then what happened is that in 2020, so a year later, I went and filmed to document and film my film on another glacier called the Presena. And this is what I chose to do. And this is the work that we're showing for the first time here at MIA. And it's basically, I didn't need to put the installation in front of nature anymore. I didn't need to put these strong symbols, because this was the symbol. This was like a fact. So it wasn't a warning anymore. It wasn't about choice anymore. It was about what's happening now. And so the work was done in 2020. It's only being shown for the first time here this year. And, the time shrine, the symbol, the symbology is about the blanket, so you're basically seeing a glacier that is being covered and that is trying to be protected. But obviously the cover is only there to try and slow down its demise. It's already on the verge of disappearing. It's only a reason, they're only doing it to slow it down. But what really touched me in the work was the fact that, there was these people who were sewing on top of the glacier with this blue thread, and that's the the name of the title of the film, of the series, this blue thread. So sewing is such an ancient part of our cultures. It's belonged to all the eras. It's belonged to all of our civilizations, So sewing, it means, to repair, to protect, to make something stay for longer. And I was very fascinated by that. I found that very touching, because in the same time, you're saying, okay, this is the demise, this is the end of the glacier, this is the Anthropocene. This is an image about the Anthropocene. You cannot argue on this. You can't say whether it exists or not. It's happening. And you can see it. But in the same time, there's this, incredible resilience of our species that is capable of saying, well, okay, well, we're going to try and do something about it. We're going to try and protect it. We're going to sew on top of it. There's something about love, right? Because there is, that's the big story. It's about, what we love, what we choose to love. And obviously, you're going to love what you know. And you're going to, obviously protect what you love. So it was all this mix. What I'm trying to do with this series that I'm presenting here is to show you that, yes, this is happening. Yes, it's terrible. Yes, it's urgent. But at the same time, yes, we can. I'm not quoting anybody here, but we really can. We really can make a difference. And we can do it because we're already doing it. We just have to find new ways of doing it. And so that series is here today. But obviously, I was so shocked by what happened and what I saw that last year I finally, did this other piece of art, and I inspired myself from the sewing of this blue, this blue thread and the sewing of this glacier. And I created, so this is another image of the same series that's here, so you can come and see it, is that this is the last piece of, to end my 10 years of work. This is what I created last year in 2023. So 10 years after I had been to that glacier that I showed you at the beginning, that was one of the last images I photographed in 2013, was what I looked back at the glacier, and it was so beautiful, and it was dusk, and I took a picture of it. And then last year, I kind of embroidered it always with that same blue thread, remember me, because that glacier's not there anymore. It's gone. And that nostalgia, that loss, is something that I think is very important for us to feel. because in the end of the day, that's what art can do, and that's how art can help, the Anthropocene go from negative to positive, is to show you that loss, but also show you the love, and hopefully help you think all, to the public that, we can definitely do still a lot to protect our planet.
Thank you, Anne. That was really important and touching. Now, before leaving the floor to Henry, I would like to make a brief introduction. Henry Fair is an American photographer and environmental artist. Focuses his work on visualizing the elusive processes of global warming, pollution, and environmental destruction, and the position that art takes in this context. Henry has dedicated his life to documenting landscape changes with the aim of raising awarenesses about environmental issues. There are mainly 2 series dedicated to this topic: Coastlines, a portrait of the coast before the major impacts of climate change and ocean rise take effect, where we see the fast increasing of coastal population density and infrastructure investment. The second work related to the environmental issues is Industrial Scar, and you can see it at the Arco booth here at MIA, a series in which Henry researched environmental disasters, revealing unseen views of these effects as the tragic, as the tragic secrets from oil drilling, hydrofracking and coal ash waste, large-scale agricultural production, and abandoned mining operations. Henry creates images that are simultaneously stunning and unsettling, which visually resemble as abstract paintings. He captured these images from an open window of a small airplane 1,000 feet above the Earth's surface. His photographs attract, at first glance, for the beauty of the partially abstract images of human interventions on nature, and also for the fascinating and unusual perspective with which they are taken. Only with a second, more careful look, we understand that he wants to lead us to look at the tragic effects created by human impact on our planet. I would like to quote here again a statement by Henry, who made a few years ago in an exhibition where he showed the same series. If the pictures are not beautiful, the viewer will not stop to consider them or cherish them. You talk about beauty, Henry. The landscape that surrounds us is full of natural beauties that must be preserved. I find very interesting your point of view as a photographer in transforming the disaster that is happening before your eyes into a scenario of abstraction of destruction. And here again, I want to quote Bourriot. The Anthropocene, that is the civilization of climate change, is haunted by a great fear, the impossibility of rewaving a world, of rebuilding what is dislocating before our very eyes. In other words, the feeling that is already too late. We are engulfed and submerged by catastrophe. Oil slicks are the most spectacular form of pollution, which is an imbalance, a disorder. This declaration, I would say, is exactly what we see in your photos, Henry, through the abstraction of the construction. We go beyond the imbalance and the disorder created by this spectacular form of pollution. Do you want to tell us more about this series?
Yes, please. A slight technical. Hopefully our technology will work with us and not against us. Ironically, I started with the same, and now I want my notes. Yes, well, okay. Okay. I guess I don't get my notes. So ironically, I started with the same, all right, I'm going to try for the notes. I don't know the technology well enough. Okay. Ironically, I started with the same Caspar David Friedrich that Emanuela started with. We did it separately. What do we see? Does he control the world? Does the world control him? Art has always been inspired by nature. Nature is it's everything for us. Without nature, we have nothing. Beethoven's sonatas were inspired by the sound of birds. Man is, though, by definition, political. And of course, as art became more and more complex and more about our society, it became very political. This is one of my favorite artists, Francisco de Goya, and we know that he was tormented by war and by man's suffering. And I think some of the greatest paintings in the world are Goya's black paintings, which he did on his own living room walls. He did not create them for anyone to see. He just created them for himself out of his own anguish. And in art history, of course, we were told that the artists who tried so hard to change our progress into the world wars then gave up when they could not change the progress of humanity and could not stop the war. Then they moved to abstraction. And of course, if you know the Italian futurists, in some ways, they glorified war. They glorified mechanism. And the machine is a beautiful thing. But again, after the wars, we moved into abstraction. This is Willem de Kooning. I, of course, also see the beauty of machines. They are, in some ways, the pinnacle of what we can do as humans. These machines are actually mining coal in Germany. And coal, it's such an interesting thing. Without coal, we would not have had the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, of course, leads to our modern world. But the extraction of coal and the burning of coal is one of the primary things that is destroying us. This is the largest hole in Europe. It's called the Hambach-Tagebau. So one of the last old-growth forests in Europe, owned by Charlemagne, coincidentally, is being cut down to dig this coal. The coal is powering the largest carbon sources in Europe. There are 3 power plants right around Cologne, which are the largest source of carbon emitted in Europe, and also the largest source of all of the other pollutants that are associated with coal. Mercury, uranium, all of these terrible things. This is about the Anthropocene, and we are physically changing the planet. This is coal mining in America, and this is one of my heroes. He's now dead. He showed me this coal mine. In fact, that picture is taken from this point, and he is expressing amazement at the fact that the earth is literally splitting in half. So, we are changing the world. Where do we go from here? Yeah? I am fortunate to work with many scientists. I'm both an artist, but I am an activist. And I want to change the world for the better. The scientists tell us that we can slow it down. We can make the world okay for our children. We must act immediately, and we must act drastically. One of the first things of the Anthropocene, the largest change that we create on the planet is agriculture. Yeah, in this picture we see a man in Africa cutting down a forest and burning it to plant crops. And it's one of the most essential things that we humans do. We know that the same thing is happening in Brazil at the Amazon, where we're cutting down the Amazon to grow soy to feed our cows so that we can have inexpensive beef. And of course, as we grow plants, with agriculture, we need fertilizer. And this is one of the, this is a phosphate mine in Florida. And this is downstream of that same phosphate mine where the toxins from the processing are destroying a forest. And of course, as we depend on modern agriculture, the pests, the bugs, then eat our plants. So we create poisons to spray on our plants to kill the bugs. But I found after starting these pictures that an abstract picture is more effective than a documentary picture. For instance, this picture doesn't touch your emotion, but this picture does touch your emotion. And similarly, this picture, which is about there's a place in northern Canada where we are digging up the earth for gasoline. It's called the tar sands. This is one of the pictures we have on exhibit at the gallery. And this is the result of what they're doing in the tar sands. And we've taken this very verdant, this green, moist forest and created a desert in northern Canada. And now we have forest fires in a place which is supposed to be a wetland. Again, I am fascinated by our technology. And for me, the machine, which is the pinnacle of our ability as humans, is also beautiful. This is an offshore oil rig. And for me, there is a beauty. I am a futurist. But yet, this is it's called the Deepwater Horizon spill. Maybe you remember it. The anniversary is next week. And in 2010, the BP oil rig spilled, we don't know how much oil over the Gulf of Mexico. And the results remain to this day, because the Anthropocene is not just what we see on land, it's also what happens everywhere else. And the scientists tell us that there is a giant layer of sludge on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico as the result of this oil spill. And here we see the oil going into a bird sanctuary. This is one of the other pictures we have on exhibit at Artco Gallery, and it's a plastics plant owned by, well, I won't say who owns it, but it's the making of plastics, which of course is again oil. This one, very interestingly, which we have also at Artco Gallery, is the reason that the Nazis did not invade Sweden. This is the largest iron mine in the world, and the Swedes promised the Nazis that they would continue to sell that iron, and therefore the Germans said, okay, we will not invade Sweden. I'm always fascinated by the historical context of these environmental issues. And of course, we are now at a time where the Anthropocene, the impacts of what we've been doing for the last 100 years are coming home to us. Maybe you remember last summer there was the largest wildfire in Europe in Greece. And so I went this September and I photographed the results of this wildfire. And I'm fascinated by the things we are doing to counteract the effects of the Anthropocene. I loved Anne's work of the blankets which we are putting on top of glaciers to try to save them. And one of the things I'm photographing is the walls that we are building to try to protect our coastal cities. This is the gates that close the river, the mouth of the Rhine in Rotterdam. And there you can see it large. And these are the gates that they put in to protect Venice. And there you see the Malamocco Channel with Venice in the background. So, of course, the MOSA project is there to protect Venice, but only for a short time. And this, I close with this. These are the wetlands in the lagoon of Venice. And clearly, it is man-made. And I guess I close with a question of, do we leave something untouched? Thank you. And we will do a book signing at Artco Gallery at 4 o'clock, and I would love to see you there.
Thank you, Henry. We will come to the booth for sure for the signing. Thank you. And now, Andrea Botto. Andrea is a photographer, artist, and teacher. Since the 90s, he uses photography to analyze the surrounding world, dealing with issues related to landscape and environment. He cooperates with public authorities and multidisciplinary groups for the study of landscape, with particular attention to geology, environment, and memory of historical events. He's interested in observing the processes of transformation through an aesthetic of creative destruction. We were talking before with Henry about an abstraction of the destruction. Now we talk once more about an act of destruction, but it's a creative one. Andrea, through these photographs, documents explosions in the civil sector that take place inside the mountains to build tunnels, explosions used to control avalanches or to demolish urban structures in areas of transformation and recovery of the territory as motorways, bridges, stadiums, thermoelectric power plants. The purpose of the explosions is to demolish and then rebuild, therefore a creative destruction. The explosion is certainly a destruction, a dissolution, but in certain cases it is necessary to destroy in order to rebuild, to renew, and to transform the landscape. Precisely the transformation of the landscape is one of the key themes of Andrea's research, a landscape that transforms, that undergoes a change. His photographs that investigate the unstable balance that governs the landscape are not mere reproduction of what happens before his eyes. They must not provide answers, but ask questions. For Mia, Andrea presents at Carbuccia Gallery booth a selection of 5 photographs coming from different series, which underline how he conceives photography both as an example of apparent violent and destructive action and the prelude to a transformation, a new beginning. Andrea's vision of reality goes against the catastrophic narrative of a world victim of a climate global crisis that seems irreversible, in order to look towards an intelligent reuse of space. He makes visible certain activities that are hidden to our eyes and which demonstrate the desire and the intent to safeguard the environment. We are often convinced that by outlining a disaster, we can accelerate measures to avoid it, hence the catastrophic message of the Anthropocene era. Obviously, the problems, the risks, and the emergency cannot be denied, but following Andrea's aesthetic of creative destruction, I want to ask Andrea whether we can make the Anthropocene an opportunity to rethink our planet. we have to.
Okay, thank you very much. I try to go fast, as quick as possible. So thank you, Emanuela. And so yes, I started to do or to work with explosive. Where is it? La presentazione. Aspetta, che non ho. Io utente Mac ho sempre delle difficoltà con il. Ah, scusa, ecco, era lì, guardate. Vabbè. Okay. I started to take pictures of explosion in 2008 as the global economy went down. And just in case you ask, the reason is not my surname. My surname is Botto, in Italian means boom, so I'm the right man in the right place, and it's not a joke. My background is landscape photography, but I've never been interested in the simple contemplation as Caspar David Friedrich, or documentation. I have always been attracted to the entropic processes of modification and dissolution, both anthropic and geological. And I believe in photography as a staging of reality, but at the same time a real act to modify reality in some way. And first of all, I think it's a way of questioning visual and cultural issues, triggering an imagery that is already present in the mind of the bystander, the beholder. The subject is, for me, always a pretext to undermine the medium I use to make art and its language. So in more than 25 years of career, I worked on the effects of landscape modification as landslide, earthquakes, historical event, and demolition. And at the end, I came to the use of explosives in the civil field as controlled demolition, excavation, tunneling, pyrotechnics, and so on. They are like unique and unrepeatable events, quickly transformation process where a large amount of energy is released, but which once triggered, you can't stop and nor rewind. Another interesting thing is that to see the explosion, you have or you must wait that it is already happened. By the way, the waiting for the event itself, made up of a series of project studies, technical preparations, becomes part of the work in a very performative way. And again, the choice of the distance from the subject, for me, is another relevant part of my work. In the case of blasting, it always means a safe distance, obviously, and it's the same of a curious bystander and the same of the shot firer watching the destruction he creates. And that, I think, reminds us that looking is never a neutral act. Obviously, with my work, I clash with the traditions of the past, placing myself in a dialectical and in some way also subversive position, on the one hand, I literally undermined the foundations of the tradition of landscape photography by putting explosives inside the images. And on the other side, I try to oppose to that rhetoric from the past century related to the myth of decisive moment, for example. My training is in line with the master Walker Evans called documentary style. So I never considered myself as a reporter. I don't take documentary pictures, but I use documentary style to make art. So it sounds like a little difference, but for me is substantial. I use photography ambiguity to show something, but at the same time, I try to say or to show you something different, even the opposite somehow. I want to question people watching my artworks and to make them ask, for example, what I'm looking at when I see a picture like this. Or maybe like Mitchell said, what does this picture really want from me? Every day we watch the destruction of the world with a kind of indifference, or even worse, with fun. The blasting for me is the representation of a dissolution, a perfect metaphor for that destruction. And it is sublime, a sublime spectacle, a mix of pleasure and fear at the same time. And obviously it is a violent and painful, but you maybe have to destroy first in order to rebuild and renew. That's why I'm usually speaking about a creative destruction. At the moment, I am particularly focused on the possibility of experimentation given by underground blasting excavation. Underground is obviously an unusual and mysterious place, mostly unknown to the general public. And there I was able in the last years to take the very first pictures ever made in history of photography of an underground blast, and I'm still going on experimenting new challenges. The picture, this picture, if it comes, okay. This picture that you can see also live in a big print dimension at our booth at Carbuccia Gallery is one of those special results. The result of the construction of a concrete shelter for the camera, the position of the little flashlights on the walls on the gallery, the study of the delay times, the connection of the camera to one of the detonators, the attempt also to predict the final result and to approach it by approximation. All these operations make up a single performance, which is part of my creative process, becoming itself an artwork. The picture is about a mine in north of Italy, in Trento, in Val di Non, and is basically about excavation and destruction. What is more anthropocentric or more destructive than excavation. But at the same time, there is a meaning that you can see if you go beyond the picture. Because since a few years, the empty spaces from excavation are used to stock large quantities of apples, wine, and cheese, for example. And they are making also a new data center inside these tunnels. And it is a way to save energy in some way, and also to save the landscape outside, because they don't have to build more warehouses outside in the valley. So this is to say that between the catastrophic imagery about global warming and the indifference of a capitalistic speculation, there could be maybe another way as a more pragmatic adaptation to the events we are living. As Anne said, yes, we can, maybe. And someone else said, long time ago, it's easy if you try. Let's try. No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for these important messages. I think we can, yes, we can. I think we can try. We have to try. We have to act, and we have to remember how important it is to protect, prevent our planet in our daily life. I think this is a very important message. Now, do we still have time for a few questions, or we are completely running out of time? We are. Is there a question from? Is there a short question from any one of you? No? I think then we can, yes, to digest and to metabolize. I thank you very much for the attention, and thank you once more to Andrea, Henry, and Anne.